All right, we're just getting started for another Ask Vanessa Anything. Welcome. Good to have you here live on YouTube. We're also here live on Zoom. Just going to take a minute to get on Instagram too. Hi. Hello. Welcome. Welcome to another Ask Vanessa Anything. So good to see folks. Welcome. Glad you're here. See, Sterling is back from coming to this last month. Welcome back, Sterling. We're also on Zoom and Instagram and on YouTube. So hello to everybody. Good to see you all. And for some reason, it's not spotlighting me yet. So let me get that going. That's interesting. It almost always shows me, but it's not showing me now on Zoom. Sterling, let me know if you can see my video or if it's still featuring yours instead. It's doing something strange I've never seen before. So I'd love your perspective on that. That'd be great. Let me know. Okay, you can see my video. That's good. Okay. All right. In this Zoom land where they're constantly doing updates and things change. So hopefully we'll get it back working normally again. All right, well, welcome to Ask Vanessa Anything. So glad you're here. And we're going to have a chance to answer some of your most pressing questions. And it's always a good variety. There are always a good variety of questions that come in. And how these questions arrive is either by going to thecalmempoweredparent.com and scrolling down to the bottom and submitting your own personal question. We also have folks who join our free Facebook group on that's called Raising Our Resilience Parent Group. And when they request to join, they share what's on their mind about what's most challenging right now. And oftentimes we have really lovely questions come in that way as well. So looking forward to seeing how this session rolls out. So let's get started. So Marisol shares that her 8-year-old hates homework and it's a battle every single night, while on the other hand, her 11-year-old will finish very quickly so he can have more free time. Meanwhile, they have to repeat things many times with the 11-year-old, and that's the challenge there, and before he'll actually listen about chores. So overall, Marisol would like to connect more with both of them during the week, but in a lot of ways, they're very opposite. You can see where their resistance is opposite, but even things that make them happy as well. So she's looking for ways that she can strike that balance to make both of them happy. So Marisol, I love this question. And coming from a classroom setting where I had 12 or 24, or in some cases even 36 and 48 kids, of course, with assistants, and co-teachers, but we were constantly juggling and in charge of at least 12 children that we were trying to motivate and, like you said, make happy so they were having an enjoyable time and that I would feel connected with them. And it is challenging to balance when there are multiple kids with lots of different personalities, different ages. I taught in a multi-age classroom, so I feel for you. And I know that you're probably feeling in a lot of ways like pulled in two different directions. That's a sensation that a lot of parents have shared with me over the years. Another that I've heard is feeling like you have to almost like switch to different parts of your personality in order to kind of meet the needs in the room of having two very different kids. And also not just your parts of your personality that need to come out, but also parenting approach. Like one child might do and even need a lot more structure and sort of hand-holding through things, and the other might be craving like a lot of independence and asserting that. And it can change over time too as they move through the stages. So what I always like to normalize is that kids require us to be very adaptable and attuned. And the way that we can do that effectively, where we're not feeling sort of frazzled and stressed that what was working before or with one kid is now not working or is not working with the other kid, is to embrace the fact that different needs at different moments and different strategies and tools will work at different times. And the way that I can most empower you today and hopefully bring some calm to you is to give you like a few more options of tools and speak of them in this way that's almost like approaching it with some curiosity, we go, like, I wonder what would happen if, right? Like, I wonder what would happen if I were to pause, put my own sort of lid back on, calm down, soothe myself in front of my kids so they can see what that looks like as we're all getting frustrated about, let's say, homework or chores, like you mentioned. Um, and try something like taking a 5-minute brain break together, or on another approach, maybe say, state the goal of what we'd like this next half hour to be like. Like, let's say it's like, the half hour of before when they get home from something in the afternoon, and then before dinner, and that's a time you'd like either chores for your 11-year-old or your 8-year-old to start their homework. You can set the intention even in the car before you get out of the car and enter the building, and say, even state what's been hard. And I have clients do this all the time. And it's this way that you can make them part of the solution and the team, like kind of by default, instead of like assuming, now kids, remember, you have to do this when you get inside. It already sort of sets up a power dynamic, something for them to push back on. And what I would like to see all of us try more, and I've done with some great success with young kids, and even like Moby homeschoolers, and like just all kinds of clients and kids that I've worked with, is to have like a collaborative spirit around how can we make this the best experience possible. So before you get out of the car, coming back to the scenario, you're about to go in, and there's about 30 to 45 minutes before dinner time. They're supposed to be getting these things done. You can ask them a question, especially when they're age 6 and older, but especially when they're 8, they almost need this from us. They need to ask this, you need to ask this kind of question. What kind of like afternoon, or what kind of time frame, whatever it is, what kind of afternoon do you want to have? What kind of experience do you want to have between now and dinner? And you can name what's been hard, and they know what you're talking about. Like, do we want to have one where I'm coming into your room and giving you reminder after reminder, and you're getting annoyed at me about, getting your homework started? Do we want the one where I'm like chasing you around to get your chores done and then threatening to take away your iPad, right? Or your phone? Or do we want something different? And usually the kids will go, yeah, that sucks. I don't really like that either. And they'll say something, well, could we have it? Maybe they'll suggest, can it be less tense? Can it be more fun? Could it be less stressful? Can it be more like relaxed, right? Can it be more chill? I've heard a kid say to me before, I want it to be more chill. Okay, what would chill look like then is the next question, right? So what would you like to experience more or less of? And what would that look like? And usually it comes back to the thing that you're bothered by too. And I specifically named a very common struggle around this, is that I'm coming in and having to give you reminders. You're sitting there being interrupted by my reminders. That's not fun. That creates the power struggle. That's not easeful. That's not relaxed, right? Another thing that could be, something that could look different is than less reminders, could be, right, less consequences being like sort of lorded over them and threatened, and more cooperation on their side and an initiative. And then you can talk about what that would look like. And the reason why I say, what would that look like, instead of just sort of giving them a broad term, like you should listen better, and I'll now you less, which is fine. But I would get into something specific, like paint a picture of what's actually going to happen. And say it from the I place. Like, how I imagine it is that we go in the door, you put your stuff away, and without me having to ask you to, you go get started on your chore, or you go get your homework organized. That's what I'm imagining is going to happen first. And then you ask them, like, what do you imagine would happen first if for us to have like a less stressful time, have a more easeful time, right? What would that look like in your world? Like, what would you like to see happen? And then paint that picture together, fill in the spaces, right? So you might then talk about, well, what level of support might you need in order to get started on your chore, right? Do you need me to help you find supplies, help you remember the sequence of how to get it done? Do you need some company, that I'm just in the room with you? Do you want me to be the DJ and play some fun music? Right? Do you want me to come in and, instead of interrupting with a reminder, like come in and like surprise you and tickle you? Like, there are so many things that are possible here you can put on the menu that are different from the pattern you're stuck in. And there's something about that conversation, that pre-gaming, that they're like, not only involved in, which helps them to be engaged, but it also helps them to have more buy-in to the plan. So that, like, in a sense, you've gotten their permission, their consent, their agreement, even their invitation to engage with them this way. And then you have to do this magical thing that I say everyone needs to do when they're trying something new, and be open to and stay curious and say, and we'll see how it goes. It's one of the hardest things for us to do, is like relinquish control. We'll see how it goes. It's very open-ended, right? It's not like, and if you don't do it, then this bad thing happens. If you do it, then this really good thing happens. If that's how you've been running things, I would say ease up in that kind of vein of like making happen, right? Do this, let's see how it goes. And then you have a debrief afterward. And the debrief is just as important as the pregame, right? Need this like post-game, like, review, reflection. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? Did we achieve our goal of making it feel more chill or more relaxed or more fun or more easeful, right? Why or why not? Where did it go well, and where did it break down? Why did it break down? Okay, what do we want to try differently next time? What do we want to keep from this time that worked well? It's amazing what can come from this. Like, I've had a group of, like I said, like 24 to 36 kids on average in my classroom. We'll sit down, we'll have a class meeting about something that's been irksome. Like, we're reminding kids to clean up their snack area over and over and over again so it's ready for the next kid, and it's not going well. So we have all these meetings about like, what could snack cleanup reminders look like? And the kids came up with a system of like, they would bring the snack pass to the next person, and that person would have to go check the spot and say, okay, it's good. Before that, they could go back to work or play from snack. And so we had like a peer checking system that they invented. And it took like 3 iterations to get there over a week. But then snack mostly ran independently of the teacher's support for months after that. And of course, we'd have to do refreshers and tweak some things. And kids like, well, what if we do one more thing? And what if we just do this? So I loved it. It was like a democracy, right? Where everybody gets to, even like a collaborative coalition or something, we all get to like weigh in on how it goes. And in that spirit, if we approach it that way, kids will start to open up to being part of the solution instead of just part of the problem, stuck in patterns that we've unconsciously, subconsciously agreed to being stuck in. If you keep doing the same thing and they keep doing the same thing, that's an agreement to stay stuck. And so we can trouble those patterns by being very intentional and naming what they are and asking, what could we try next to make this better? And in what way are we going to do that together? So that's where I'd start. Now, there's a lot of science behind also supporting kids to scaffold them to higher skill levels, which we're not going to be able to cover today, but it's something that is a whole, cycle of learning that I bring all my clients through, for example, so they understand how to encourage kids to learn that independence and become competent and become confident through breaking things down into smaller steps and creating little success cycles. It works really well with any kind of skill acquisition. So there's that piece that you could bring into play. The other is to discover what are each of your kids' top soothing strategies, intrinsic motivation strategies, and also their love languages, because you're talking about staying connected to them and wanting to like just generally connect more, and knowing what ways they like to spend time with you or connect in general can be really helpful. Now, when you say, I hear you say connect more with them during the week, that makes me think of that you might really value quality time. And in order to achieve quality time, because that's one of my favorites too, you have to sort of know what modes kids like to spend quality time with you. And so I would also be just trying to discover that. When is it easy for us to spend quality time together? Is it while we play a game? Is it while we're outdoors at the park? Is it on car rides? Is it when we're reading together and talking about the story? Like paying attention to those, and don't be afraid to just pick 1 or 2 things that you reliably put on the calendar every single week as special time. We walk the dog every Wednesday. We make brunch every Sunday morning. We read our chapter book on Friday nights when we don't have to worry about bedtime as much, right? Or we read aloud our chapter book at 3 nights a week at dinner, and we progress the story. And that way we all have time together, even though we have different interests. this is one thing that we know that we can coalesce around. We watch one more episode of our favorite sitcom, like my family, my stepchildren, and my ex and I, when we were all together in the same household. We watched, I think, every single episode of The Office over like 5 years. It's just what worked for us. And, my stepdaughter didn't always want to be there. She was older than my stepson, but my stepson was glued. Like he was really into it. And so we stuck with it. It worked. And, I know too many things about what it's like to work at Dunder Mifflin now in this fictional workplace, but it worked for us, right? It was something for to bring us together. So I'd also be looking for what do we as a family enjoy together? And it's okay if it's the same thing over and over again, variety within that container, fine, but maybe the mode is the same. It's like watching a sitcom and reading that book or being outdoors. Okay. So those are some things. And, sometimes they are skill building things. Like I teach you how to cook a new recipe. Like now you can make mac and cheese and you can make like, toaster oven pizza, and you can make cupcake in a cup in the microwave. Like, maybe you're building on some skills there as you're spending time together, but do look for those channels and name them. It's really okay. Like we get to be transparent with our kids about our efforts parenting. That's another thing that's newer in sort of the parenting canon of skills and sort of ways of being. I think in older generations or more traditional models, you don't really let the kids in on like behind the scenes to know like how things are actually curated or made. Like you just don't do it, right? You kind of like keep those cards close to your chest, because otherwise if they know, they're going to be able to win or something. And you show your hand too early, that idea, and it's just not necessarily true here with kids. They actually feel respected. They feel like they have more dignity when you let them in on what you're up to. Like I'll even say things like, I don't want to have to offer choices and give you a consequence right now, but it's looking like the only way to get through to you is to say that this, you have these two choices, and if you make this choice, we need to take away something. Is that where we need to go right now? I'll check in with a kid about that. And it's amazing how often they'll be like, oh, you're actually talking to me at this different level. I'll speak back to you at that same level. So lots of invitations here to be collaborative with your kids. So Marisol, if you have follow-up questions, let us know. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next question. I'm excited for this one because this is somebody that I've been chatting with a bit around mentorship, and this is one of those questions that I feel like everybody can benefit from. I do cover it as well in our next season that's about to be released, by the way, on Monday. Our season 2 of the podcast is kicking off with a sleep expert episode to help you get kiddos to sleep and to stay in bed and to have better sleep habits as a family, us included, of course, and some really good top expert tips. I have 2 different people I interviewed for that who are sleep coaches, and so much more coming starting on Monday. And one of the episodes is the best of Ask Vanessa Anything, and I do talk about this topic a bit. So if that's you, you can, stay tuned for season 2. Go ahead and get on Instagram at The Calm Empowered Parent. We have an Instagram channel now, which I'm streaming live on as well. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, same thing, The Calm Empowered Parent. Really a great way to get some visuals if you're a visual person. Some of our videos actually, not only do you see the people, but we also show some diagrams and slides and things. If you're that kind of learner, I highly recommend getting over to YouTube and subscribing to the channel. And then you can always, stay up to date with us by being on our newsletter. I think that's how Sterling found us today, and others who are tuning in. We give, announcements for what's going on, what's new with the podcast, some tip sheets, things like that, free resources. So let us know by submitting a question or just a contact form at my website, The Calm Empowered Parent, and we'll get you the scoop of what's happening. All right. Well, so to this question. The question from our mail is, I need strategies on how to deal with tantrums hitting and harsh words from my 6-year-old. All right, so first we have to understand that all behavior is communication. I'll say it again, all behavior is communication. And so usually when kids are expressing themselves through physical aggression of any kind, they are showing us several things. And so one of the communications is, I'm out of control right now and I'm dysregulated and I need help with that. Okay. And usually when it comes to the tantrums, the hitting, the harshness, that's usually some anger and frustration that's built up in their system, and now they are expressing it loudly. And one of the things that anger and frustration really like is to be seen and heard and understood. And so oftentimes we have to do a very quick and precise and accurate validation of the message that's trying to come through. Oh, you really don't like it when you don't get a turn. You're very upset at mommy right now, right? And you're trying to hit her. And or like this is something that you really don't want to happen again. I see that. You see, this is not something you like at all, right? Like really see it, because oftentimes whatever activated the anger and now there's this expression coming through is connected to a feeling of lots of times like injustice, unfairness, inaccuracy, like just something like that's restricting them from something that they want. And so you can even also say the positive, like, oh, you really want this, but you can't have it right now. That's really hard. I hear that. And then you also need to address the behavior. And so this is when we try and brilliantly bring together support, which is also oftentimes structure, like feedback and choices and following through and acting swiftly. And support, which is more of the like empathizing and soothing and validating and making sure they know that you're there for them, even though, and you still love them, and you're going to help them calm down, find a way to calm down, even though they're trying to hit you. Like these things can go together. Often what happens is that we think that there are two separate channels of parenting and we have to be in one or the other. And it's a very common and very natural phenomenon to kind of swing between these two places of being like, oh, baby, I'm so sorry. But then they're hitting you. And doesn't seem quite right. And be like, no, no hitting. Excuse me. I got it. But then that can really escalate things and make it worse and make you seem like a unyielding force that they need to like really come up against, right? And maybe do that pushing where there's a very big embroiled, intense power struggle, so things intensify, right? So how do we bring these two things together so we don't get these, mixed messages? So what I would say is that as long as you're mixing them seamlessly in the moment, it's not a mixed message. You can both love, support, empathize, and validate while you provide structure and follow through and help them learn what they need to learn about how things work. And how I like to do that is I like to alternate sentiments in the same conversation. So it's sort of the yes and game from, let's say, theater and drama, where there's like improv, where something's happening on the stage and you say, yes, yes, this is happening. And here's my thing I'm bringing in. And then the next person goes, yes, and. So the idea behind yes, and is that you're not necessarily creating a binary of one or the other. You're saying both of these things can exist at the same time, just like ambivalence. Like you can be sad and angry at the same time. You can be sad and sorry, or you can be like hopeful and nervous at the same time, right? And anxious. So how do we do this? It can sound something like this, and it takes practice, but check this out. You can say, oh, sweetie, we don't use our hands to hit in this family. That hurts bodies. And I can see you really don't like it when sister takes your toy. Is that right? Oh, you're so upset right now about that. I understand. I don't like it when people take my things either. But honey, your hands. Can you put your hands in my hands? Are you ready to use calm hands? You can offer your hands out, palms up. No? Okay. Well, you could also put them in your pocket, but you can't use your hands to tell your sister you don't like it anymore. I know, honey, it's hard. Oh, you're not ready to put your hands in my hands? You're not ready to put your hands in your pockets? Okay, then, sweetie, we're gonna need to move away from sister then. Yeah, until we're ready. Yep, I know, it's not easy. You want to stay. I understand. We can stay when we're ready to use gentle hands. So let's go over here to the couch. Oh, you don't want to walk on your own? Okay, looks like I'm picking you up. Oh, you don't want me to pick you up? Okay, let's see if you can walk on your own. Oh, you are walking on your own. Great. Okay, good. Seems like you're getting back in control of your body, honey. Nice. Okay. And then there's like the help them soothe down, emotion coach them a little bit, maybe give them some space because you're triggering them now. They're like, I don't want all this from you. That's okay too. And you can leave them in a room and say, come join us when you're ready to use gentle hands. There's so much in there, right? Like you see how it went back and forth. So you don't have to pick one or the other. They can coexist in the same kind of interaction and space when there's hitting, when there's kicking, when there's using bad language. Now, a concept I want to share with you that I've shared with some of my clients that very recently who've been going through this is that sometimes what they lose is not toys. It's not screen time. It's not like dessert. It's just access. Like if they're going to trying to hit a body, then they don't have access to bodies right now. Like in that example, I made it not I mean that their sister's body not accessible to their hands, right? To hit, they had to move away. And even if they start trying to hit me, then I would also move away and say, oh, no, stay, we're going to stay over here and I'm going to come over here. And sometimes that means you have to close a door. And sometimes that means you have to tell them to sit in a chair and that they can't get up until they're ready to use gentle hands. And it's like one of the least attractive parts of parenting when it gets to this point. But our children need us to show up strongly and fairly when these things are happening. Because what they need to know in the end of the day is that if they lose control, you've got a handle on the situation. And they can rely on you. Like we want them to walk away going, wow, dad's really reliable, mom's really reliable, even when I'm being like I'm losing it. And that way also they tend to, when they have that, usually when they come down from a tantrum, the sadness rises, or sometimes exhaustion, which can lead to tears too. And they want to know that you still love them and you care about them, and you can help them through these things, and you can help them learn how things work, and you're there, and you're not blown out too. So the other thing I want to say is like lid detecting is always important. Being able to gauge how far the lid is off, how dysregulated are we. The example I gave, I'm assuming like 3/4, not all the way off. All the way off, it's quicker, it's shorter, there's less language even than I modeled, maybe half. If the lids are more on, you can have more pauses and more dialogue, more back and forth, more try again sooner, right? And then, sometimes there's just a time where they're just constantly at lid half off and you have to be like, what's going on here? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, things that need to be resolved. Maybe change up the situation entirely. Like this is just, they're just getting re-triggered. So that's when a toy does get put away or we put away the iPad. We go outside where they can kind of let it out, right? You change up the scene. But there's a lot of things you can do. Now, to be able to do these things and remember them in the moment, it's a whole skill set. I had to build it up over a couple of years. And I have clients who get to it in 3 to 6 months, but often it does take the full year for it to feel quote unquote natural and accessible. And then even in the second year is where it just becomes like muscle memory. It's like automatic. Your automatic response is, oh, looks like you need help with something. Here I am, being both supportive and demanding, And I have now report backs from lots of families who are in the later part of their first year or in their second or even third year saying, I stay calm now. Like I don't get rattled. And just that alone has helped me to be firmer with boundaries. And now I can start to really collaborate with my kids about how we're going to handle these situations. And we're doing more of those proactive things because I'm not so fried, I can't even remember to do them, and etc. So there's a lot of hope in this. And I gave you kind of like a powerful preview of what it can look like at the end of it, where you notice that I was modeling not getting upset. I was pretty calm. And that is available to you. It is. Even if it's not your history, even if it's not what you grew up with, even if you don't have a working model of someone else doing that in front of you, it's something that you can step into and bring into your family system. And it can really do some magic. Some people say that the transformation is even kind of miraculous. They feel like they have a different kid at home and that they're a different parent. And it's available to each and every one of you. And that's a very hopeful thing, isn't it? Okay, we're moving on to the next question. This comes from Joey. Okay, let me start it off properly. Here we go. Joey asks, what can I do when I start getting overstimulated by my child's constant talking when I don't have enough energy to match hers? I love this question, Joey. We have those kids who are very verbose and talkative, chatty, a lot of times in a stream of consciousness, so it doesn't really even it's not really even a two-way conversation. They really just want an audience. They want a sounding board. They want to be able to verbalize. And a lot of kids, that is their habit. I don't know if you've seen the movie Leo, but it has Adam Sandler as this cute little, I think he's a lizard. Yeah, it's a lizard. And there's one of the first kids that he quote unquote helps, um, doesn't know how to filter and just talks. And I found it really endearing because I personally just really have a soft spot for these kids because I was a chatty kid. And verbal expression is still one of my favorites. It's part of why I've become a mentor, a teacher, a lecturer, a podcaster, et cetera. It's because I do enjoy communication through like, the verbal sort of channel. What I want you to do is start helping your child notice the other person. So here's what that could look like. You could say, honey, you've shared a lot. Now it's my turn. Now it's my turn. So just like the idea of that, the proverbial microphone gets passed back and forth. So it's my turn. And if she tries to interrupt you, you can say, oh, not quite done with my turn. And the reason I want to borrow my turn as an expression is that it's something that your child has likely encountered in gameplay. And if they haven't yet, this will help prep them for it. So there's the taking turns. Now you can actually add in something concrete to signify this. And what I would do is I would start to play games where you have to take turns listening and speaking, or just generally practice listening. Even the classics like Simon Says and Duck Duck Goose, and also storytelling. You can, lean on your books for a break from their talking, and read out loud to them or have them listen to an audiobook, and then pause and ask them for their input, and then say, okay, now we're going to go back to listening. So you want to like attach the idea of taking turns and listening to positive experiences. That way, when there's a constant stream of talking, you can say, sweetie, I need you to listen. And they will have had practice with that kind of concept and that ability to quiet themselves and take in information. The other thing you can work on in the listening is comprehension. And that's where, of course, like the smaller versions of Simon Says and Duck Duck Goose, but with books, you can actually train them to listen for things. Let's see what she says to let's say like Little Red Riding Hood. Let's see what she says to the big bad wolf next. I wonder what it's going to be. And then you read, and then at the end, what did you hear? What did she say? Oh, why do you think she said that? Right. So taking an interest in this other channel, which is receptive verbal language, auditory, basically, receptive language, so that it gets to the point where they start to like value pausing and taking in information. And it's not just a habit to break. There's actually something to build there that will make this a more robust transformation of their communication style. Okay. Yeah. The other thing you can do is set up a nonverbal like cue of, hey, sweetie. And it can be something kind of funny, like like some kind of like chat with your hands where you like open and close it and you go, oh, and like touch your mouth or something to make it like a shh, kind of like, ooh, like, right. That sort of thing. You can also like have a talking object that you pass around at dinner, or you take turns, maybe contributing to a game. Like we're going to name as many colors as we can. We're going to say as many things that we can think of that start with the letter B. Like it can be kind of edutainment, kind of little round table games. You could like share a highlight and a low light of the day, or a gratitude, or something funny. Like you can take turns telling jokes. There's all these ways you can take turns and actually have an object you pass around. Kids like objects that are hefty or from nature, like a big shell. They like stuff like that, or like, a little, like a heavy, smooth stone. They also like to make little wands with like curled ribbons and feathers on the end and stuff like that. That just feels kind of whimsical. So there's a lot of ways that you can do in those glitter ones that like it's glass, and when you tilt it, the glitter sparkles up and down it. You can do like a rain stick, those kinds of things, like interesting objects that are distinct. And then in a pinch, I've seen kids do this spontaneously, and even had a mom tell me that in the back seat, her two siblings, which at the time I think were 5 and 7, that seems about right. Yeah, 5 and 7, said, we need to talk about this. We need to take turns talking over this respectfully, which is, by the way, something that we train the 4 problem-solving suggestions in my program. It's one of the options is you can talk it over respectfully. And they said, we need something that we can pass back and forth because there's too much interrupting. I mean, they're being so sophisticated solving their own problem here, by the way. And and so I think they passed back and forth something really funny, like an avocado from the grocery bag, or I forgot what it was exactly, but they just picked a common object and they were like, let's use this. I've used a pencil or a pen, just something that's close by in the middle of helping 2 kids solve a conflict. So there's also just practicing, working things out, talking, taking turns, listening and speaking, okay, with a talking object, a talking stick, something like that. So whatever your talking stick could be in your home, practice first with fun things and then move on to more serious things, and even interrupting them by getting the object and saying, I'd like to take turns. You can do that once you set it up. And the other thing is that, you can have a way that you have your own like recovery pose or your own like recovery space, where that means this is when you give your family members some space, some peace and quiet. I've had families establish a chair as a peace and quiet chair. I've had them do those little indoor tents. In my program, we have this retreat every February or thereabouts called the Emotional Mastery Weekend, and we build calm down corners across the weekend as part of a contest. And then the kids end up using them and helping build them as well. And so you can have something like that, like a calm down corner, which, by the way, there's like a better way to do it and an okay way to do it and kind of a bad way to do it that you want to avoid. So that's something you might want to do just a little work with, either in a program like mine or just, with some of your own research before you set it up, because you can kind of ruin the whole concept if you kind of rush into it or do it a certain way that feels punitive. And more on that at the Emotional Mastery Weekend for those of you who will be there. But having a space or a zone that is like the peace and quiet zone. I have a family that has like a little add-on office in the back that they didn't even tell the kids exist. The kids are 3 and 5.5, and they just like, they're like, oh no, they don't even know this is here, because we both work from home like 3 days a week. And if they knew, it would just be mayhem while they're with their au pair in the house, because they would be coming out kind of like screaming at the window for them, because it's just hard for them to separate when they know they're on the grounds. But then when they think they're off site, they do fine. So you can even have like a very separate place. I know in my father's house, he had a basement, and he'd also often be taking a nap or doing work down there when actually he just needed some time and space to himself. And I was, as an adult, I would go down and with my little sisters, oh, it's getting quiet. Dad's sleeping downstairs. He was actually just like catching up on TV and stuff. And I could go down there and hang out with him and sneak to, they didn't know. It was just like a funny thing that would happen. So be like creative about what like a peace and quiet zone could be as well. And that could be really helpful. All right. Good one, Joey. Love that question. Hopefully some things in there. Let us know how it goes. Next one is from Amy. All right. So Amy asks, how do we keep our cool when kids are zoning out and ignoring us? So clearly, Amy, and this is not just for you, for a lot of people, being ignored, having people zone you out, can be a trigger. And that's really understandable, because in a lot of ways it is disrespectful. It doesn't acknowledge that you are valuable. It devalues maybe like your knowledge, your presence, your authority, right? And can challenge whether or not they're going to like kind of meet expectations and, show up as sort of like a meaningful contributor to the family of caring for themselves, caring for others, caring for the environment, right? So there's a lot that's packed into the zoning out and ignoring. So it's really important to name those things. I'm a big fan of getting down to like, what is the story about this that's the most upsetting? Like, what does this mean to me when my kid ignores me and zones out? And and naming some of those feelings, naming like how you're interpreting that, and then going a level deeper and a level deeper till you get to the core of it, which is like, I've had parents like break down and cry talking about this, because underneath it all, it's like, I'm scared that I'm creating little monsters and that I'm failing as a parent, which is so much deeper than it's annoying that they're ignoring me, right? Or I can't get stuff done when they ignore me, which is the surface level. So doing that deeper inventory, doing it in a safe container if you need it, like with community or a mentor, is always advisable. It's a process that we have in our program, for example, to help us get to the deeper thing so that we can kind of tap down into the root of a trigger and make it less likely to activate us. Because really, in the end of the day, I mean, maybe, yeah, the kid has a bad habit. Maybe they are adapting to their situation in a certain way by testing out power and attention and figuring out how it works. And this has been working for them on some level, even though it feels dysfunctional on the surface. Maybe on some level they're getting something out of it. And in order to get curious about that and have empathy for the fact that they're like have limited life experience and they've picked up this bad habit and they need support learning a new habit, to even have that attitude, we sometimes need to really resolve our inner conflict around it. One thing that can be helpful to hear right now too is that this is pretty normal behavior for kids. Like kids will challenge the parental authority by inaction, by ignoring. And it's such a power of play. And it's so obviously a power play because we even have like legacies of civil disobedience where the thing you do is you don't listen to what you're being told to do and you're civilly disobedient to get because it's a powerful thing to sit and ignore directions to get up, for example, right? So I would be getting curious once you resolve the inner piece and kind of soothe that part of you. I'd be getting curious about what this like normal phenomenon of testing power, what might be going on. The other thing that might be going on is just a learned like pattern where they know they can ignore you a certain number of times until they need to take you seriously. And that's not just their fault, it's also on us. Like I've had a parent come to me and after I call their child to come get their things to leave like the preschool yard, for example, or even the elementary yard, I only have to call them once, maybe twice. And the parent says to me, how do you do that? And I was like, how do I do what? And they're like, well, how do you get my kid to listen to you the first or second time? And I said, well, let's get curious about this. If you don't mind me asking, how many times do you find yourself repeating the same thing over and over again at home? And, in one case comes to mind where this mom, she kind of looks down on her feet. She's like shuffling her toes and I could tell she was a little embarrassed. But I said, it's okay. Whatever it is, like, we can start from there. She goes 10 to 12 times. And then I have to yell. And then they finally listen. I said, that sounds really hard and awful. How would you like to get it down to like 3 to 5? And then she looks up and she goes, that would change my life. I said, okay, let's work on this together. And one of the things we need to do, though, is we need to have the discipline to say, I will not repeat this more than 3 times. And then eventually I won't repeat this more than twice. Like I won't say it more than 2 times, repeat it once. Getting down there to that number can take some effort, but it can also be done pretty quickly. Like this same parent, in the matter of a month or two, was down to 3 to 5. And I don't know that she ever made it to 1 to 2 because it's just like kind of not in her personality. Like it takes her a minute to realize she's doing it, repeating herself before she realizes, oh, I probably should stop repeating myself. And we didn't actually get to work together in close mentorship. Like I was her kid's teacher, right? Other people in my program, though, have been able to get it down to 1 or 2. They just don't do it. They don't repeat themselves. So, but then you say like, well, then what? I was like, oh, there's so many other things you can say besides the same thing twice. And I like to attach it back to support and demand, like choices and supporting them with making the better choice if possible. And then taking action if they don't choose for themselves and then following through. And that's a whole process I bring my clients through the second month of every semester when we talk about reinforcing limits and, setting limits that stick that kids will actually respect and listen to. So retraining yourself and breaking that habit, bringing it down to a smaller number can be really, really helpful. If that's not the issue, if repeating yourself and them ignoring until you escalate is not the issue, like them, waiting to take you seriously is not the issue. The other thing that might be going on is that you might need to adjust your expectation for how quickly they can mode switch. I've seen this happen a lot where a parent will come into a room, say something to their kid and leave, and then they'll come back in again and say, why aren't you doing the thing? Let's say like clean up those Legos, it's time for dinner. They leave, and a mom shared this with us in one training, and comes back and actually yells from the kitchen first, "Are you cleaning up your Legos?" and I'm an observer and I'm watching, and the kid has not changed their behavior whatsoever from this interaction. And then the parent comes in and goes, why haven't you cleaned up your Legos yet? And then the child's like, oh, and is already in trouble in the first time that they actually pay attention. So one more thing I want to say is that sometimes we have to connect and get into their world, actually more often than not. I'd say at least 10 times more than adults. We need to connect and get into their world before they're ready to receive anything from us. And especially if what they're receiving is a request to transition from one activity to another, or one mode from another, like being passive and listening to like watching a show to getting up and doing a chore, like that's like a huge leap in mode switch, right? Like, we're going from passive to active. We're going to sort of sedentary to physically moving our body. Like that transition itself is probably going to be its own event. And it might be 1 to 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the day and the ask and how far along you are in sort of getting these transitions down. So embracing that and also giving the kids some dignity around this. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't like when someone comes into the room and tells me what to do and I'm supposed to do it right away. Generally, I'm not a fan. Occasionally that's really helpful if like I need some help, maybe being a little more disciplined about like getting out the door on time or something like that. But usually if somebody's doing that, my reaction as a feisty person is to push back. And I did for years to my mom. Her number was about 5. And then she'd escalate in a way that sounded very scary. And I was like, I better or else. And I never really knew what the or else was because I always hopped up and did it. But she had to do that. Vanessa, 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 like that. I was like, oh God. Um, and I still, even to this day, if she's visiting and she uses that tone for whatever reason, like some part of me gets really worried about myself and what's going to happen next. Because I was so deeply trained to only really like kind of come awake or something into the transition of connection with that tone. So here's some things you can replace it with. Sit next to them, ask them a question about what they're already doing. Put some, like, just join them for just even 10 to 30 seconds. Make physical contact can be really helpful. A little rub on the back, a little squeeze on the arm, a little, pat or something. Ask for a fist bump. Something that's like getting acknowledgement that you're in the room and you're making physical contact. Ask them to put the thing away, and you'll wait until you have them, they put it away and you have their eyes. Ask for their eyes. Ask them to repeat back what they heard, and maybe a refining question to make sure that they didn't just hear you, they understood and comprehended. I mean, imagine me having to transition 24 kids at once. I had to be good at this or game over. So these things I'm sharing with you, classroom tested across, hundreds of kids over 15 plus years, and then also in my own household. And different things work for different people and different kids and different timing. So just like, I think like embracing the fact that you're going to need to do novel, different, and maybe sometimes awkwardly not in your regular repertoire things to smooth out these transitions at first, to stumble upon and discover like your top hits for your kid, for each of your kids in your care, and just understanding that that's how it works. And it's not that you have a kid who doesn't want to listen to you or let you necessarily. Now, again, I've said this before in other episodes, if though you work on it, especially if you take a structured approach over 3 months, you've gotten some support, you've been trying things very consistently, you're not making any inroads, that's when you might want to look at some clinical solutions, getting their hearing checked, doing a neuropsych evaluation to see if they're having true attentional difficulties or, kind of like mode switching difficulties. That's a thing. But don't assume that that's what's happening just because it's happening now. I would be like really working through a structured approach to rule some things out first and see if you can make some headway. And even if they do end up having something like an ADD diagnosis, because some zoning out is actually one of those symptoms of ADD. You've already gone down some road of establishing that you are willing to work on this with them. You've also maybe stumbled on some discoveries of things that help and some discoveries of things that don't work and don't help. And that will only be valuable once you get an evaluation and if you end up with a diagnosis. So I would say don't wait for a diagnosis to try these things, right? And also they're pretty universal. Like I said, who doesn't like it when someone takes the time to connect with you before they direct you and tell you what to do or make you switch modes? And also like have a heads up too, right? There's so many other pieces that we didn't cover today that I go over in my programs, but I wanted you to have at least something you could try right away. So those of you listening, yeah, please let us know how it goes. We're always happy to get comments and follow-up questions. So we're here for that. All right, and last question to round out the hour. This is from Vigetha. Okay, so here, kick off this question. Make sure the dog can get out. There you go, Boots. Vigetha asks, my daughter is 15 years old and worries about everything. How can I help her? Whew, I feel your heart in this, Vigetha. This is really hard. I would have some more questions. I'm sure anyone who might be also potentially evaluating your child for generalized anxiety disorder, which could be a possibility here, will have a lot of questions. Like, how long has this been going on? What do these episodes look like? How frequent are they? How long do they last? How intense are they? How much is this getting in the way of her everyday activities? Things like school, homework, chores, things like social things like friendships, participating in social activities, speaking up for themselves in situations. Is it limiting their kind of options or possibilities they see for themselves when it comes to even, their future, like, areas of study, activities and hobbies, kinds of social situations that they'll feel comfortable in. Are they starting to worry about things like not being able to handle college, things like that. I would want to know more about all of that. How much is this impacting your daughter's daily life? And that would often help us understand the size and complexity of like intervention that might be needed. Because when I hear worries about everything, it does raise a little flag and it makes me want to know more. So just know that if this is something that's been concerning you, Vigetha, like I would say it's probably appropriate to be concerned and start to look into more resources for your daughter. Now, as her parent, some of the ways that we can feed into worry is that we can try to make it go away too fast. So we can be overly comforting in a way that is actually dismissive and doesn't get to the root of the cause of their worry. And so two things that are really popular that have worked quite well with some of the clients I've worked with whose kids are anxious, maybe about simple things like getting into water or being around dogs or being in a social situation that's unfamiliar, right? Being in a crowd, like those kinds of things are exposure events, and also like really doing a cognitive strategy where they like a lot of times I do this even for our triggers. We get to the root story and we see if we can trouble that story. Like, is it always true in every case that when you are in a crowd that you get pushed and shoved and knocked over? Because maybe it happened once, right? Is it always true? And then the third piece that comes in after that is having, alongside the exposure events, is giving them ways that they can not only be exposed, but be like proactively looking after whatever it is they're most scared about. So for young kids, for those of you listening with young kids, it could be flashing a flashlight into the corners to make sure there are no spiders before they go to sleep, like they have something they can do about it. And then maybe slowly exposing them to spiders outside the home from a distance where they can just see the little sparkling web in a dot, and then eventually have them walk up and look at it without getting any physical contact with the spider or the spider web, and just observing and noticing that it's not out to get you. Like, did it jump at you? Did it try to bite you? Did it try to get you? No, right? It's actually looking for little flies, and you're not a fly, right? So with the 16-year-old or 15-year-old version, a teenage version, isn't actually that far off. You kind of have an exposure event. So let's say they're scared of crowds and you go to something where there are more than 10 people to start. And things are pretty calm, like everybody's seated, right? Like maybe you're going to sit in a crowd watching a small, like local production of something, a little theater moment. Or maybe you're like gathering around a busker out in public, right? By a fountain, somebody's doing some performance and you gather and you say, I know there's a crowd study, but let's just we'll stand on the outside of it. You can squeeze my hand if you want to go. but we're going to set a timer and see if we can stand here for 5 minutes. And if anything comes up, remember, you can squeeze my hand and we'll try our breaths and then comfort ourselves. And I think we're going to make it. But if it needs to be 2 minutes, that's okay too, right? So you can have these kind of exposure events plus some tools stacked in there where they have some control and they can start to, build in those mechanisms of being able to handle the emotions that come up with worry. The other thing we need to understand about worry, and it's Brene Brown, who I actually learned this from in her Atlas of Emotions book. She makes this distinction between generalized anxiety and worry. Worry, luckily, is a cognitive activity. And the reason why that's lucky is that you can literally like change your mind about the thing, right? You can move your thoughts to a different place, think differently about them, and soothe your worries. So putting it into perspective of like saying, is this always true or is this never true, right? Like, and saying, what are the exceptions, and putting into perspective that like, oh, there are all these other ways that this thing could go that you're worried about. Remembering historical events where things did work out. And then also this cognitive, like having a plan for how you're going to get through it. All of that can be helpful. The other thing is that if there are any sort of like, OCD tendencies around these worries, where if it doesn't get soothed, then they can fall apart in these very particular ways. There are therapists who work on OCD with people of all ages. So you're going to want to look out for that. And in those situations, oftentimes you're actually doing your best to like dismiss and move on for some of these things to help break that pattern of like soothing with something very specific, so that the brain thinks, oh, the only way I can be soothed is with this one thing. And so you can, either replace it with something that's more adaptive, or you can teach them that, you don't need to wash your hands 3 times to get them clean. One is enough, and you won't go out the door at one. And then they're like, and you're like, see, but then they see like actually one is okay. And it can be over time, treated in that way. So that's another piece to just be considering. Like, is there something that seems like they're inconsolable about unless it's done in a very specific way, and it's more of this controlling anxiety? Then you might want to look into, having a clinical take on whether or not there's some OCD going on, and then getting some treatment there and some more specific suggestions, because it's nuanced. It's a little bit different than just generalized anxiety and worry, or kind of like your regular adolescent angsty worry, which is what some kids are going to have. And building their confidence up with these exposure events, letting them take small steps at a time, helping them get that perspective and review how things went in the past. Like, these are all on the table on the menu for helping with anxiety, and especially worry. You can disrupt the thinking with new thoughts. And sometimes that's even as simple as, let's get your mind off of it until your nervous system baseline comes down, or your quote unquote lid is back on. And then we'll revisit this and see if we're still having this big response to it, where it's something we really need to worry about. I have a history of being a worrier. I have worriers in my family, quite a few. And so it's a learned behavior that I've seen. And I cannot tell you how powerful these cognitive strategies are. And sometimes just writing out your fears as a teenager and older, you can start to do this. You write out all your fears, and then one by one you go through and you basically argue, make a counter argument to every single one, right? I always hyperventilate when I'm in crowds. I sometimes hyperventilate in crowds if it's hot and there's over 100 people and I don't have access to any way of cooling down or getting some space or some air. Very different, right? So I can try and avoid situations where there are over 100 people. And when I can't, I can bring a cool beverage, I can sit near the exit, and I can have somebody there who also knows about my trigger and can help me. And all of a sudden you're in a very different place mentally, because you feel prepared and you have a solution and you have hope again that you're going to be able to manage if these things come up. And so instead of worry, you kind of go, okay, I got this. I think this is going to be okay. Or I feel more prepared, even though I'm still a little bit worried. I feel less worried, right? Intensity coming down. Good job, everybody. Good to have you here at Ask Vanessa Anything. Sometimes it feels like everything, but this time anything. And yeah, so good to have you here. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments, we always welcome them in the chat, in the comments. It's really helpful if you share, like, and subscribe for the things that you enjoy in our channels to help more parents have access to these resources, and help us find great fit families for our awesome programs. We have beautiful cohorts that start in January and July every year. Enrollment opens a few months ahead of time. We have a new cohort opening soon, in October. So for January. And if that's something that you're interested in, please make sure you let me know. You can say it in the comments. I'm interested, tell me more. You can reach out to me through my website at vanessacallahan.com or thecalmempoweredparent.com. Always happy to hear from folks also if you just want to have a free consultation and get some more eyes on what's going on with your particular family and your particular child, because there's a lot of nuances here that we can go deeper with when we can have a back and forth conversation. And that's what those free consults are for. So you can go to my website and find the link that says parents and schedule your own breakthrough session there. We'd love to see you. Hop on my calendar. All right, and that concludes Ask Vanessa Anything for this month. Really good to see you all. Enjoy the podcast episodes that are rolling out. It's pretty special. We've got 2 coming out right away next week, and then another one every week for the next 3. So we have a nice rollout of 5 powerful episodes coming your way on all kinds of valuable topics. So enjoy them and the experts and their perspective. Until next time. All right, lots of love. Bye for now. Mhm.